Welcome to the Christian Media Marketing Show. My name is John from Kavanaugh Media. And on behalf of our whole team, thank you for spending some time with me today. I am hoping that when I share with you, this is the third part of this series, will be a benefit. That's why we do what we do. It is an honor to serve. It is an honor to serve you. It's an honor to serve the King, and it's an honor to serve the kingdom. And so we do that through the marketing services that we provide, through some cybersecurity, through media creation, through coaching, strategy development. All of that stuff is a part of what we're trying to do to offer to you our best for the King and for in service to you. And so thanks for just spending some time, whether it's listening to the podcast or watching the video show itself on YouTube, or maybe even both. Thanks. Thanks for doing that. Well, we've been looking at these last 2 weeks and spending some time diving into the idea of culture, confirmation bias, just how people make decisions and what that looks like. And it's fascinating the more you dive into just culture itself as to how it impacts the decision making that people do. This is everything from, do we even watch this video or spend time engaging with an ad, to when they private message you or maybe send a comment? How do they respond? What are they looking for? What are they thinking? What are they expecting as they think through and watch and go through our digital engagement efforts? And so today is the final part of this series that I have been doing. And I'm going to be sharing with you some information that comes really from my background. I used to teach communication, I was a communication professor at a small Christian college. And these are some of the theories, communication theories, that I studied when I went and did my graduate work at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And so one of the big areas I did research in was expectancy violation theory, which is basically a big way of saying we all have expectations. What happens when they aren't met or when they are exceeded, when it goes beyond that? And how do we judge that? Other thing that I spent a fair amount of time doing some research in was counter attitudinal advocacy, basically getting people to look at things from another way of another viewpoint or another way. This can happen sometimes when we use words like, well, if. So for example, if somebody says, I don't think the Bible's true, I don't like it. Okay. But if it was true, what do you think you would have to do? And this is where getting people to think and look at things from another perspective can be really, really powerful. This is this counter attitudinal, this counter attitude, this argument from the other side, getting them to look at something from the opposite way. Well, if the Bible is true, I would have to do this. If Jesus was truly the Lord of all, I would need to be doing this. This gets them going past their barriers to thinking about application or obedience. So CAA, counter attitudinal advocacy, is what I want to share with you. And then there are 6 or 7 more other communication theories that I think can help you in your digital engagement and just your overall Christian ministry efforts. So let's dive in, look at some of these other communication theories and how they might apply to your digital engagement. Let's do this together. All right. So communication theory may not be something that you have studied or even think much about, but it's something that we all do. Theories are based upon reality, things that we see happening in the world. And counter attitudinal advocacy, CAA, is something that potentially you do and you have seen others do, which is basically just asking people to look at something from the opposite side. What's interesting, before we dive any more into this, is that research has shown is that when people look at something from a certain viewpoint, especially if they've never looked at it before, that's the view that they tend to hold on to. And so when people have to defend and think about something from a certain way of looking at it, that becomes their default way of looking at it. And so they've taken a subject, they've asked students completely knew nothing about it, split them into two groups to defend a position, to research it and defend it. And then they asked the students afterwards, which view did you think was correct? And the majority of the students believe the one that they actually researched and presented. So what we're trying to do is to get people to look at things from a Christian worldview and to explore it and to sidestep some of those natural defenses, those cultural biases that I talked about last week, to really look at the claims of Christ and to look at the information that's being presented in these conversations and dialogues with those who are seeking. So, in our digital engagement efforts, here are a few ways that CAA, counter attitudinal advocacy, and some other theories can impact that. So, the whole idea of CAA is that when a person experiences something that doesn't fit, it creates dissonance. And cognitive dissonance, that theory is that when people do this, there's this inconsistency between their attitudes, beliefs, their behaviors, then they feel discomfort. This is this dissonance. And so what do you or I want to do when we feel this discomfort? Well, we want to get rid of it. And so what ends up happening many times is that people will change their beliefs so that they don't feel that discomfort. So, as I talked about in the last episode, when presented with other information that doesn't fit with what maybe you or I might believe, what do we do with it? Do we hold on to that discomfort or do we just discard it? Well, people tend to either begin to accept it or they will reject it, but they don't like living in this mental dissonance types of things. No one really wants to live with a lie. This is one of the arguments for why Christianity is true, is that all these people went out and were willing to even die for this reality that Jesus was alive. And so we want to plant these pebbles in people's shoes, small little pebbles, this little bit of discomfort, pressing on that cognitive, almost like a bruise, like where you press on it, you're like, oh, I don't like it. Well, that's what we're trying to do when we're presenting things that are about Jesus. This is going back maybe this whole who is Jesus? Is he a Lord? Is he a liar? Or is he a lunatic? You know, he can't just be a good guy because he claimed certain things. So we're trying to get people to think about who Jesus is through our media, but also then as we move off of the media to face or however you're doing your evangelism, discipleship, leadership development, even, how are you helping them think through these things? And it's through the use of questions many times that can create this dissidence, this putting this pebble in their shoe, asking questions, but why? Or what if? Those kind of things. Another theory that impacts all of this is what's called ELM, or elaboration likelihood model. Basically, there's two roads when people are trying to make up their mind on something. There is the central route, which is they dig into it, they have careful consideration, they look at all sides of it. And then there's the peripheral route, which is more superficial looking at something. And so when you're utilizing counter attitudinal advocacy, CAA, this may actually encourage people to dig into things a little bit more than just the peripheral. So by asking questions, by really getting to the heart of something, you're helping people get an enduring attitude change. If it's peripheral, if it's just this little bit of whatever, well, then it's the winds and the waves, as James would say, and they're getting tossed here or there. But really understanding, really counting the cost, understanding the claims of Jesus. And so this is one area where CAA can help people. When you're asking people to look at something, when you're using these questions to look at it from another angle, it can help people process it in a more deeper level. Another one is just what's called inoculation theory. And this theory suggests that exposure to a weak version of an argument makes people more resistant to then stronger versions of that argument later. So, in essence, this works the exact opposite of CAA. And so, this can strengthen their existing attitude if they already have one. Now, if they don't have one at all, CAA can be really important here. But I see this a lot in younger people's ministries when they are being ministered to. A lot of times you're giving them just a little bit of the arguments that they face, say, like in youth ministry. But then they go to college, and all of a sudden, if they've never had this exposure to some of these arguments, they can be blown away by them. And so, inoculation theory is you're giving them small, bite sized arguments, helping them go through and begin to build up their resistance to this deeper level argument that's going to be given to them. The challenge of this is that if you do not help people really dig into stuff, then these superficial inoculation ones, when faced with the heavier ones that are out there, may not be sufficient to help them to withstand. And so be very careful when you're introducing these ideas. It's good to go small and to go slow with them, but we do need to help people move beyond just the superficial. So we need to help people move beyond just the inoculation to really thinking through life changing, eternity changing thinking to it. Another one of communication theories is reaction theory. And reaction theory is this idea that when people perceive their freedom to choose itself is being threatened, then they may push back. When we push against someone, they will push back against us. Think the car salesman or some sort of person who's trying to really twist their arm to try to get them to make a fast decision here. If people feel like they're being manipulated or if they feel like they're being pushed against, they're going to push back against it. So when you're asking questions and having this dialogue, when you're utilizing things like counter attitudinal advocacy, it's really important that we don't force this. We never want to manipulate people. We don't manipulate people into the kingdom. And it's possible even to win an argument, but lose a soul. So we're not arguing here. We truly care about the person we're having the conversation with and that we're sharing with. We do this with transparency and honesty. We do it with integrity, but we're trying to ask questions to help people to think through things and look at things from a different perspective. And so it's walking alongside of them. This is similar to Acts chapter 8, where Philip goes to the Ethiopian eunuch and he begins to ask questions. And then he starts right where that person is and he begins to more fully explain the way of the Lord. So this is not a pushing, this is not manipulation, because if so, then people will react back against that. So we need to be very careful. There's also this idea of social judgment theory. This really plays out in culture, and you see this, and that basically people's attitudes, actions, and beliefs, all of these things are on a continuum. So there's a whole line of how they react, and they are more likely to be persuaded when the message and the question and the information that you're sharing with them falls somewhere on this area of acceptance of their continuum. So when it's similar, it's close to, it comes back to their cultural beliefs. When it's on what society would say is, yes, this is important or true. And so what CAA will do is help people potentially shift a little bit their attitudes by reassessing this continuum that they look at. So basically, what this would look like is if we are asking them to look at something from maybe another side, then what we're asking them to look at on that is needs to be something that they have a grounding on, something in their society or culture that they can look at and understand, that they're coming back to, going, oh, yes, that is important. Yes, people are important. Yes, this is a thing that's important in my culture. So I could see why it would be important in theirs. Just getting people to look at something from a different way, but grounding it on what their culture would look at to be able to do that. All right. So social judgment theory. Couple more. And this one is self perception theory. It's really an interesting one. Basically, we look at things and we look at attitudes and make up these ideas about things by observing our own behavior at times and then trying to conclude what attitudes must have caused that behavior. So we look at something, I look at something that I do, and then I try to go, oh, well, I must have had this reasoning behind it. This is fascinating to me because we tend to many times look at what we do and go, oh, okay, well, because we know our motivation, why we were doing something, and we try to establish then our attitudes and beliefs and all these things based upon our behavior. Even though, as sinful individuals, sometimes we just do things sinful and wrong. And so our attitudes and behaviors and all of these might be wrong. But what this helps us to do is to let people begin to look at things at from their own perspective, their own self-perception. If you were this person, why do you think you would do this? See, this is really powerful. So this is what comes into it. Let me give you an example. In a fantastic book, it's out of print now, but they did this research of it. This is 1970s, I think. And in this one, there was a neighborhood in a southern state in the United States that was marked by racism and a lot of things. And they began to interview people in this certain neighborhood that was becoming more culturally and racially diverse. And the interviewers, the researchers here, began to ask people using counter attitudinal advocacy questions about what they thought about things. So they could have come in and said, this is a good thing that you have people from other ethnicities and cultures moving into your neighborhood. This is a good thing for you, and try to persuade them that way. But as you know, that probably doesn't work too well. So what they did was they asked them questions. And they asked questions like, why do you think they would want to live in your neighborhood? And so this is where self-perception, this is where we place ourselves in somebody else's position. This is where we look at it from the counter side. And people began to say things like, well, we do have a really good school district, or crime is really low here, or property values are continuing to rise. What's interesting is that they use their own self-perception of what's important to them, and they ascribe that then to other people. And this is where this becomes really, really powerful. So they began to say, oh, well, I could see why they would want to move in here. Did it completely end racism? No. But it began this process of getting people to look at things and to look at other people from a different view. This is where self-perception theory comes into it. All right. And so one final one. And basically, this is just foot in the door technique. And so by getting people to think about and maybe even to agree to small little things, this can increase the likelihood that they will agree then later on to larger things. You'll see salespeople do this, and a lot of times it's manipulative, but hey, will you do this little thing? And they're just trying to get you to say yes to something so that they can then get you to a bigger ask later to say yes. So without manipulating here, without doing any of those kind of techniques, what we're really trying to do is to get people to, like I would say, chew their food. Take small little things, take small little steps, think about things in small little ways as they begin to explore these bigger concepts to them. And as they go along, as they begin to understand the claims of Christ, as they begin to look at things from their culture, using these different ways that we communicate and think, well, then they will begin to, Lord willing, begin to understand and accept more and more just what it is that Jesus is asking of them. I think Jesus did this when he would say, well, just come follow me, come and see, taste and see. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're trying to get people to look at who Jesus is, and through media or through the messaging or even just the conversations we have with them, getting them to look at something potentially for the very first time from a completely different way of thinking that's different from their attitudes, actions, and beliefs currently in the culture that they live in. All right. So I hope that that's a benefit to you. I know there's some big terms, there's some big things there, but if you boil it all down, we're really trying to get people to look at the claims of Jesus, maybe for the very first time, from a different way than maybe they might have thought about it before, if they have thought about it, or from a way that would be different, but similar to their own culture and the ways that they are processing the information that they are constantly seeing all around them. So there's a lot to culture, there's a lot to just our biases that we bring into this, and there's a lot to the way we communicate when we're talking about Jesus. All of these things impact our digital engagement efforts. This is not just evangelism, this is discipleship, leadership development, the pre field. This is once you leave a field. This is the whole missionary task. That's why I use the term digital engagement because we're engaging every step of the process. And I believe that culture and communication play a massive role in all of that. So I hope it's a benefit to you. As always, if you have ideas or questions, please let me know. I'm looking forward to the next 12 months. I've got once a month, brand new technology that I'm going to be sharing with you all that I'm going to do one at a time through these next 12 months. So one a month, I'm going to be sharing with you tools and software that you can use that is, first of all, free or close to free, ones that you can control, maybe even self-host, that I think will help you in your digital engagement. So make sure you're coming in, subscribing to the podcast, subscribing to the YouTube show, and if you would, share it with other people. Thanks so much. I look forward to sharing with you, Lord willing, next week. Until next time, keep pressing forward, making Jesus famous. Bye for now.